Very fun. Let's pretend. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic to which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we have the minutes from the last meeting. And are there any changes? Or I'll entertain a motion to approve. Motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And first we have the agenda items. We'll go disclosures per each case. The first is case number UDP HPD 24003. Historic designation as a historic landmark of the property commonly known as the Frank Croissant House, located at 1313 South Andrews Avenue. The applicant is the Broward Trust for Historic Preservation. Michaela M. Konka, president. Hi, Michaela.
Hi.
Would you like to, I think we should have staff say something first.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
Thank you.
Lena's going to give an overview.
So the first item is historic designation as a historic landmark of the property commonly known as the Frank Croissant House, located at 1313 South Andrews Avenue. This application is presented by the president of the Broward Trust for Historic Preservation, Michaela Konka, and just a few words about this case. The parcel that contains 1313 South Andrews Avenue is comprised of two structures, a three-story commercial office building on the northern side of the parcel, and the two-story Frank Croissant, commercial office building on the, and the two-story Frank Croissant house, which is currently utilized as a law office. The property is divided into 6 condominium units, with 5 of the unit owners representing the commercial structure of the north side of the parcel, and 1 corporation with 3 owners representing the Frank Croissant house. At its July 11th, 2023 meeting, the Historic Preservation Board made a motion to consider the initiation of a historic landmark designation application for the property located at 1313 South Andrews Avenue on the following month's HPB agenda. Following the July HPB meeting, a letter was sent to all property owners inviting them to attend the August HPB meeting. On August 7, 2023, case number UDP HPD 23001, titled Consideration to Initiate a Historic Landmark Designation application for Frank Croissant residence at 1301 South Andrews Avenue, also known as 1313 South Andrews Avenue, was presented to the HPB for discussion. A concern stated by property owners present at the August HPB meeting was that the property at 1301 South Andrews Avenue comprises of 2 structures, with the building in question located at 1313 South Andrews Avenue, and that the property shares parking facilities through a condominium structure. The condominium owners representing this three-story commercial structure opposed the designation of the entire site, citing potential impacts on the parking lot and the building. The property owners of the corporation that owns the Frank Croissant house stated that they were planning to submit a historic landmark designation application for the southern half of the parcel. No further action was taken by the HPB. A complete application from the Broward Trust for Historic Preservation for historic landmark designation of Frank Croissant House was received on December 6, 2024. In the present application, a sketch and legal description was provided.
That's okay.
So In the present application, a sketch and legal description was provided that only pertains to the southern portion of the parcel that contains the Frank Croissant house, and additionally, the initial address was updated from 1301 South Andrews Avenue to the more specific 1313 South Andrews Avenue. Just a brief information about this property. The property known as Frank Croissant House, and it's significant due to its historical associations with the developer Frank Croissant and architect Francis Ebri. So you can see on the screens the property survey, updated property survey with the more specific address. The property owner is a famous local developer, Frank Croissant, and the architect of the property is Francis Ebri. The building originally served as the residence of Frank Croissant, a prominent public figure and developer who made a notable impact on the history and development of Fort Lauderdale. And the subject house was originally constructed for Frank Croissant and designed by renowned local architect Francis Ebri in 1925. The Spanish-style buildings he designed during the 1920s greatly contributed to the city's character and history. The house is a notable example of Mediterranean revival or Spanish revival architecture, which combines Spanish and Middle Eastern architectural elements found in states with Spanish colonial heritage. The applicant applied for 4 criteria for designation. First criteria is C. It's identification with a person or persons who significantly contributed to the development of the city, state, or nation, and staff approved this criteria because this building is associated with famous local developer Frank Croissant. Second criteria, it's identification as the work of the architect whose individual's work influenced the development of the city. We also confirm this because Francis Ebri is a famous designer, architect, who played a significant role in the development of the city of Fort Lauderdale. Third criteria, its value as a building recognized for the quality of its architecture and sufficient elements showing its architectural significance. It's also true because the building represents Spanish revival style and it's in a very good shape. It was preserved for years, so we confirm that as well. And final criteria is distinguishing characteristics of an architectural style valuable for the study of a period, method of construction, or use of indigenous materials. It's partially correct, but we think that it's not. We can't apply this criteria because while the Frank Croissant house represents the Mediterranean revival architectural style and maintains architectural integrity, to represent the style and design intent, staff finds that the application does not meet this criterion due to recorded alterations to the building, such as the replacement of windows and doors throughout the structure and an addition of the second floor in 1996. The structure also does not employ unique construction techniques that would distinguish it from other structures of the same time period or use of specific materials that are uniquely available with this geographic region. The summary of this report, staff finds that the application for historic landmark designation located at 1313 South Andrews Avenue under case number UDP HPD 24003 meets criteria C, D, and E as outlined in section 4724.11C7 of the ULDR. Unless otherwise specified by the approving body, each designation of a landmark shall automatically include the designation of the site upon which the landmark exists as a landmark site. In this case, the applicant is requesting to designate the southern half of the parcel for the legal description. Thank you.
Next week. Anything else?
No, that's it.
Michaela, would you have anything to add?
Not really.
Okay.
I'm in
You could
concurrence
come to
with,
the podium, please. Thank you.
good evening, Michaela Conker, Broward Trust, or President of Broward Trust for Historic Preservation. Thank you. I'm going to thank the Historic Preservation Board for giving us this opportunity this evening to preview our hard work. In terms of the staff report, I don't have anything that I would disagree with. I'm in complete concurrence with what staff has had to say with regards to the application and the research involved. I actually agree with the fact that I probably could have left off that last choice. So, but I think this should be an easy one for you guys tonight. I want to thank Ira Marcus, the owner of the home. Maybe, Ira, would you like to come up and I could introduce you?
Sure.
Ira Marcus is our esteemed attorney who has had the opportunity to restore and keep this house in beautiful condition that it's in. And he's the one that approached Broward Trust with his request for our help in getting this application completed and submitted. So please approve it. If you have any questions for either one of us, please go ahead and ask.
Can I see some?
Of course.
I'd like to thank very much Michaela and her staff who ever worked with her, as well as Tricia and her staff who have been very kind and patient with my going through this process. I've been very fortunate since about 2004 to be the gatekeeper of this gem of historic architecture. And for all those of you who have not been inside, we totally restored it and renovated it, and we think it's in terrific shape to be preserved. And the city should be very proud of it. I've just been a placeholder and been privileged to occupy it for 20 years, and I hope that it is well preserved for generations to come to see the significance of this kind of architecture, and it's a standout piece for the city, and the city should be very proud if it approves this application tonight to preserve this, because there's nothing more than preserving the history of your community. I thank you all for the opportunity to be here.
Yes.
You're the property owner?
I
When you were here, I guess it was in November of 2023, I think you cited, there was an additional property owner that had opposed. It's on the other part of the parcel. Has that been resolved, or was the parcel separated, or?
Let me explain that. When this building was originally, it was owned, one of the incarnations of the ownership was a husband and wife lawyer team. And they developed the property to the north, which is 1301. And at that time, there was insufficient parking to accommodate that building, which I think is about 10,000 square feet. So as a result, they established a condominium structure for our building and their building, and that's why it has one tax portfolio number. And we share the south parking, which is they did oppose it, and we then filed our application, and we had some internal disputes with them, and as a result of that, we withdrew our application, and then Michaela.
But is that condominium owner still opposed to this
Yes.
application?
Well, they're not here, so I shouldn't say yes. Let them come here and speak for themselves. As a matter of record, there's no one here from there to say they're opposed.
Just to note, this application was noticed to all of the property owners, including like all the condo owners on the property received a mail notice, and a sign notice was placed in front of the property as well. It was also in the newspaper. It's also the holidays and the first Monday back after Christmas and New Year's, like it's. And the applications to the Historic Preservation Board for landmark requests, it's a recommendation to the City Commission, and the City Commission is the final deciding body. So following this meeting, it will be scheduled for a City Commission public hearing, and it will be renoticed at that time.
And if we vote yes or no, it still goes to the city commission.
Either way.
Yeah, either way, it's a recommendation to the City Commission.
Okay, I have a question.
Go ahead, Tim.
How many owners are there? If you condoed the property, that legally makes it a different description than it was prior to being condoed, correct?
I'm sure I
Like,
understand.
I'm confused about
That's,
ownership.
Yeah.
You own it,
there's separate ownership of our building.
of your building.
Right. Okay.
So the building itself is chopped into different sections
No, no,
of
no.
ownership?
The building that you see in your packet right there.
Right.
We own the building. Actually, it's owned by a corporation, 1313 South Andrews. So we own that parcel. We pay taxes separately, and so forth. The only reason why there is a condominium structure is for shared parking. And shared parking is not an issue. It's not an issue for them. It's not an issue for us. We've been doing it for over 20 years and so forth. So I trust that answers your question.
I'm just trying to determine that this person who's opposed to it, the group that's opposed to the person or group that's opposed to it, they have no ownership of what will be declared historic?
No.
But they have a complaint because it's going to affect their parking?
No, if they were here and if they were of record before this board so that you can consider whether or not they truly oppose it, and I would suggest to you can't, because no one's here to tell you that. But I will share with you what they told us.
Okay.
They said, well, if you designate your property as historic, then it can't be knocked down. I said, yes, that's the purpose. And we were hoping that we would go together, you and I, and we would sell it to a big developer. I said, no, I bought this from someone who had a love for historic buildings, and I have a love for historic buildings, being from Boston, and I love this building. I said the reason I bought it was to preserve it. So we're gonna go ahead, whether you like it or not, and we're gonna file an application. So they cannot interfere with our ability to go, with your ability, I should say, to go forward and approve this, because it's my understanding that the Historic Preservation Trust can make an application when they think a property is historically significant, and that's what they're doing. So if they wanted to come here and oppose their application, they could have.
Okay. Just to be clear, I'll just make this statement. I think it's wonderful that the property owner is passionate, sincere, and ready to preserve this building because it is absolutely beautiful and it should be preserved. But this is the situation that's literally perfect, where the owner wants to do it and it meets the criteria. But if there was an ounce of ownership that was against it, I would not be in favor of doing this. So just to be clear, there is no conflict of ownership here. There's only an opinion of his neighbor that he would not like to see this property become historic.
I don't know that that's accurate.
Well, the legal description that's in there, is it all of the buildings that, excluding the person that's objecting, or?
No, it only includes the southern half of the parcel, which contains the structure.
Does that contain the
the Frank
parking lot or no?
It doesn't contain some of the parking. I'm not sure if they utilize, the building to the north utilizes some of the parking on the southern half of the parcel or
Yeah,
not,
that
but
was-
it doesn't really affect the parking situation. It's a zoning issue with parking. Right, but I think last time when they were here, the parking issue was an issue because they have rights to the parking. So if you take part of this parcel, if I'm remembering correctly, if you take part of this parcel, then it does affect the property owners, because this is not a, hey, there's two parcels and everybody owns their own thing. It's a collective condo. So you think about a collective condo, think about your business. If all of a sudden you have right to a certain amount of parking as a part of your ownership of a condo or a part of a parcel, and then then somebody comes and changes that, and all of a sudden you're inhibited by that, that is a different scenario.
If they actually split the parcel and they were no longer part of the same parcel, then there would be somewhat of an issue where they would have to recalculate the parking and figure out whether or not they meet the parking requirements. And in this case, the Historic Preservation Board needs to figure out if this application for historic designation does or does not meet the criteria within the code for historic designations.
Ms. Walker?
But I just, one moment, I just wanna make sure that we're being genuine with the statements that, I think it's great that you wanna take this building and you wanna preserve it. I think that's fantastic. I agree with Tim though, that when you come in and you, there are rights to a specific property owner. And I am just recalling, I don't think maybe Sonia and Shane were on the board, but I think Tim, you were on the board when this first came, and Marcus were on the board when this first came. There were issues to that property owner. There is nobody here today, and I understand that, but it's also the Monday after a 2-week holiday.
They could have written a letter.
Yeah.
But you don't know, maybe they didn't get it, that's the concern that I have, because I don't know,
Look, we can't make excuses.
I understand, but you can, even within your own testimony that you just gave, you had the Historic Preservation Trust's,
Broward Trust.
I'm sorry,
Historic Preservation.
the Broward Trust make this application because you couldn't come to an agreement with the other owners of this, is what you said.
I did say that.
Okay, so then that implies that there are people on this parcel that are, and this board could still move forward with designating it. I just wanna make sure that we're all being intellectually honest about where we are and what is occurring here.
Okay, so if you're gonna do that, then let's clarify the record.
Okay.
A, there's no one here to object. So whatever they did the last time is irrelevant for today. That's just mine. Secondly, there was no issue about parking. If there ever was, that wasn't their issue. Their issue was exactly what I just said. They thought that by designating our building as historic, it would devalue their property because they wanted to do a joint venture. Really, that's not any of this board's business, okay? But I'm sharing that with you. If they were really, truly interested in objecting, someone would be here. That's number one. Number two is, not only did they get an email about today, they got certified mail noticing this, and on the property next door to them, there is a big sign that says there's a public hearing today. The owner of the building, 1301, came by the other day and looked at it, passed the sign, we chatted, there was an issue with the sprinkler, so forth. With reference to the parking, there is zero issue with the parking. Zero issue. And if our building is approved for designation, it won't change anything. Won't change the parking, won't change won't change anything that affects them. Not one thing. So I just want to clarify, there's no issue with the parking.
What happens to parcels of land, since it's one collective site, what happens to, if there is a question about
the value of that property? Does the value of that property and what they are able to do on that property change because they are adjacent to a historic property? Can they still, if they are designated for X units at X height, are they still able to do that if they now are essentially next door to a historic property?
So you're talking about the value of the property going
I'm
forward, or-
asking for as this is one parcel, you have two pieces of property on the one parcel. If one of the two parcels is designated historic, so now you have a historic building next to a non-historic building, can that non-historic building, if they wanted to, if that area is zoned for 3 stories, 4 stories, 2 stories, whatever that is zoned for, would they still be entitled to that regardless?
It should, yeah, it's, as long as we make sure that the legal description is accurate, that it only contains what's being, that it does not contain that building. Yeah, they should be able to do, there's only one thing in our land use plan that says you gotta come for review and comment to the board, but other than that.
For development that's immediately adjacent to a historic property. They could even propose a development around the historic building,
But it's
but it
just
still
review and
needs to
comment.
meet criteria within the code and it has to come to the Historic Preservation Board.
By the way, I would argue that it might increase the value of their property. And if you look around the city, for the other historic properties, Reed Tobler's building is next to a non-historic building. The Casablanca restaurant is next to and I could go on whatever other structures there are. The Needham Estate on the New River, that's surrounded by condominiums, so.
Lots of examples out there, Ashley. And just as an aside, I'm going to try to pull you back into your main reason for being on this board, and that is to review staff report with regards to the application for a designation. And the topic that the way that the direction of this conversation is going for me is going down a different road. That the focus is not being brought your focus for me should be coming back to this particular structure, which we now know based on staff, based on my application and my report, that it is a significant historic property and is deserving of landmark designation. And we would love for that property to maintain for perpetuity for the city of Fort Lauderdale and for our community in general. But that aside, I just want to make one more point. And I don't have the accurate number of gray properties left, but the numbers are diminishing. And this architect was an esteemed architect in his time in the early period when the city was developing. And many of his structures have long now disappeared. So I implore you to please bring the focus back into the actual reason for why we're here tonight, and that is to designate this property.
The only other thing I would tell you is that by designating this property, it makes it infinitely more difficult for me to sell it, to get my investment out. And as a result of this designation, I will probably lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. Because I could sell it tomorrow to a developer who will put a high rise. You want that? Fine. Ignore, decline the designation, and that's what you'll get, because tomorrow I'll sell it to a developer.
Okay, all well said, all truthful. Everybody here is for the same reason. And I just want to clarify that when we go off point to our purpose, it's because we've had many discussions about expanding our responsibility to ownership of properties. There was a time when properties were just designated without any ownership participation. And many of us felt that that was unfair
I
and
too,
unethical.
felt that way,
So
Tim.
no one's trying to make this not happen. What I'm trying to do is make it happen, but without any hiccups. So in simple terms, for Patricia and our city attorney, is there anyone's name on this property? Is there any ownership outside of this gentleman and his corporation? Is there any hiccup coming if we approve this? That's all I'm saying. I'm confused in that this is just a neighbor that says, hey, I don't wanna see your building declared historic, cause then I can't go up on mine. Well, that's not our problem. That's their neighbor's problem. If they're sharing a parking lot and that's a hiccup, that they have a legal piece of property there that's going to be deemed historic, and they're not, we don't know that they are informed, we made the effort, I agree with that. But that for me is not enough.
Okay, so under 4714 of the ULDR, it states that private deed restrictions or private covenants for a subdivision or agreements for the use of property which have not been approved by the city and made a part of the approved development permit do not fall within this jurisdiction or enforcement of the city. So basically it states that if they have a dispute and it's a contract dealing with what they're dealing with, that's not our concern. We're only supposed to look at our particular code and determine whether or not this application meets the criteria in the code. So second of all, there are, private property rights that have been, passed by the Florida legislature, but that again is a private cause of action that they can go, they can go and dispute that on their own. But under our code, the Broward Trust has the authority, no matter who owns the property, to file this application.
I understand that.
But I just wanted to bring your attention to page 2, and we can confirm this with the applicant. If you look at the beginning of I guess I'll call it the second paragraph, but in the beginning, it states that a complete application from the Broward Trust for Historic Preservation for Historic Landmark Designation was received on December 6th. In the present application, a sketch and legal description was provided that only pertains to the southern portion of the parcel that contains the Frank Crescent House. Additionally, the initial address was updated from 1301 to the more specific 1313. So if there is something dealing with parking that's a private matter, that has nothing to do with the city. The authority is there in our code and in the law, so it's really up to the board to determine whether or not the criteria is met.
And I appreciate you explaining that to me, but I still would like some clarity on whether or not there is another entity that has legal ownership of the property that we are designating to be historic.
So
Is all ownership being represented at this meeting tonight?
Yes, under oath, and just to
That's all I'm concerned about, because I just would not feel comfortable saying yes if someone had 10% or was liable, someone slipped and fell on that property, would they only be suing you, or would they be suing you and the guy that doesn't want to see that?
Well, they'd be suing my corporation.
Is he part of your corporation?
No.
Okay.
So the other thing I want to add to this, which may help clarify it in your mind, is we, meaning this building, my corporation that owns this building, is free to sell this without restriction from them.
Then you answered my question.
Okay.
And I applaud you for this amount of money and effort. It's passionate, it's wonderful, it's a perfect situation, but this other little hiccup, I really felt like we needed to clarify it, because those are the little cracks in the foundation that make things fall apart.
Respect
I
and due
Tim,
diligence.
I respect your opinion, but again, I'm going to bring it back to exactly what Sherry just pointed out. You're here to be focusing on the city ordinances, and the ordinances are what drive the city, drive this meeting, and those ordinances are what you need to be focusing on when it comes to making these kinds of decisions. Not your personal feelings about whether or not this man is stepping on another man's toes because of some real estate transaction. That has zero to do with what's going on here at this meeting.
Perhaps.
So-
I'll tell you what I said on our
Sorry, how I
first
feel.
meeting.
If anyone else has.
I have a conscience and I have to live by a conscience as well. So I don't wanna get into it with you,
But I just think that's just ethically wrong, and I'll always hold that position as long as I have a chair
I
here.
respect your opinion.
That's why I'm
I
here.
just from a
We need to move on to
No problem.
Are there any other
sorry.
public comments? Anyone else from the public wish to speak on this matter? If not, I'll open it.
Arthur, I don't know if we did disclosures, did we? Cause I
Oh, we
don't
did
think-
not
I
do
don't think we
disclosures,
did.
I'm
Can we do
sorry.
that?
Are there any disclosures?
I've driven by the property.
I've driven by.
None.
I haven't driven by it recently, but I've driven by it probably hundreds of times.
I've
Okay.
driven by it not recently, and I obviously was privy to the hearing the last time we had this.
Right.
Is it board discussion? I have a question.
If there's no public discussion, sure.
Would you close the public hearing?
Well,
You have to close it.
we open up the public hearing. If not, we'll close the public hearing, okay?
Shari, on our staff report, where the box that illustrates the property in question, there are clearly multiple buildings on that one parcel. So is it the staff's position that this individual owns that all of the buildings on this one property, and is that defining? Cause I too am confused on
Are you talking
how
about
it's.
this one? This?
Yeah.
This is from GIS, and GIS wasn't updated so far because they just received these new sketches and legal description, so it's the old, like, that's all we have on our GIS maps.
So they are not legally splitting the parcel though, so it will never actually be updated on the GIS map, but in the packet, in the report, there is a page that has the sketch and legal that the applicant has provided, and this has been reviewed by our city
Here, it's on
surveyor.
the screen. So it's lots 7 and 8 that's in the application, which is the southern 2 lots.
It's page 9 of the designation report. And page 10, which shows the structures that are on the parcel. So the northern parcel has 5 condominium units. Or the
Lot
north,
9 and 10.
Just lot 10.
part of lot 9 and 10 has it's a 3-story commercial building, and it has 5 condominium units, but only 2 different owners within those 5 units.
And then lot 8 and 7 is what is being.
This is what we own.
Yeah, then
On
the
lot
southern
9.
part, it has the Coruscant house on that parcel. And the other structures that you see are just canvas awnings that are covering parking. But that is one entity that owns the Coruscant house.
Lot 7.
Yeah, I
Seven
can't read
and
it.
Part of
eight.
lot 9.
Can you read this?
You see where that bold line is?
It's right here.
Yeah.
That's
All
also
of lot 7 and
below
8
that,
together
included in
is
this.
a portion of lot
Oh, I see.
9.
9, okay.
That's
7 and 8, part of 9.
And this is just a recommendation to the city board.
Yeah, it's a recommendation to the city commission.
We're not actually.
It's just to approve or deny, the commission is all.
And it's recommending which criteria the application meets.
Well, it's also saying we recommend for it to be designated historic to the board.
Yeah, you're recommending the fact that it meets the criteria for which it's being designated. So any designation application has to meet at least one of 7 criteria that's listed in the code.
For me, I think it's definitely a structure that we should preserve. It's specific to the southern portion that owns 100% of. I have no history of any of this past conversation, so in my mind, I can't consider it because it's irrelevant it's not part of the scope of this application and if anybody did oppose it, they're not here. It's up to them to go to the city council meeting and
Right.
say something, but for me, that's not part of the scope of what we're here to do today, so I would approve it.
I agree with Sonia. I think this is a great application, and I appreciate the applicant's enthusiasm here. There's no one here to oppose this, and I'm not gonna consider any hearsay testimony. So I'd be in favor of approving this.
I would be too. Heard everything I needed to hear. Still feel as though there might be a gray area, but that's gonna be between the guys that are involved. I love this beautiful building and I think the owner's doing a wonderful job, taking the responsibility to keep it this way. So I'm all in favor of it at this point.
And I have one concern with the staff report that although the windows and doors may not be the original, I don't think that should be a deal breaker when it comes to designating this as historic. It can always be changed. So I would be in favor of designating this as a landmark. So can we have a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move to recommend to approve the request for historic landmark designation located at 1313 South Andrews Avenue under case number UDP-HPD 24003 based on a finding this request meets criteria C, D, E, and F as outlined in section 47-24.11.C.7 of the ULDR based on the staff report and testimony heard here today.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
The motion carries. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have item number 2, UDP HP 24038. And this is 709 Southwest 4th Court, number 1 to 7. Tricia.
Yeah, so this application is a certificate of appropriateness for major alterations for the replacement of existing windows, replacement of the front entry door, the installation of one new opening, and the installation
Do you wanna take a little break?
we're gonna lose a quorum,
Yeah,
Arthur.
just take.
Oh,
It's okay, no, go ahead, go ahead.
even while you're reading?
No, because you have to use the information to make the vote, so it's better
Oh,
to,
okay.
yeah,
I'll be
since we
right
don't
back.
have quorum.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so let's just.
Thanks so much, Mr. Martin.
Sorry, I was late, guys. I went to the wrong place.
No.
It's okay.
When she was texting me, "Where are you?" I was like, "Oh, they were waiting on me." I apologize. I was like, I thought they moved it to my email and when I rechecked the email.
Yeah, we can't remember that we made it.
Not after this meeting. It's like, oh. Of course, it's the
Yeah.
first day everybody's back, so it's like traffic was.
I almost didn't make it because I had jury duty.
Oh.
And
Did you get picked?
thankfully no, but I didn't know I had to stay at Boston until like 2:30.
Because I have one comment about this last project.
I do
I
have
was
a
just saying,
quorum
I have
back.
to leave at 7, so maybe we can.
Move it up, okay.
The meeting is in order. You can limit your conversation.
Tricia?
Yeah.
Can we somehow put a clip on these so that it's not a bunch of loose paper?
Yeah, I mean, in this case, the applicant
Oh,
provided.
they do that, but
Yeah.
it's like, cause everything's loose,
Yeah,
I know,
okay,
okay? Okay,
okay.
please go
Would you
ahead.
like to do disclosures for this next item?
Yes, do we have disclosures for HPV item number 2? None?
I walk by the property
Okay.
about every day.
None.
Okay,
So back to the the staff report. So this item is a certificate of appropriateness for major alterations for window replacement, front entry door replacement, installation of one new opening, and the installation of a new heating and air conditioning system on a contributing property in the Sailboat Bend Historic District. It's a 2-story multifamily residential property and currently has a mixture of jalousie windows and single hung windows. The applicant is requesting to replace all of the window openings with single hung windows, the front entry door with a new French door, and create one new opening that would contain a single hung window that's in the rear of the structure. The HVAC system would be placed in various locations throughout the structure. It's more of a split unit system. The only comment from staff on that is that one of the units is close to the front of the building and it should be pushed back slightly behind the front facade. When we spoke to the applicant, they were agreeable to that. For the most part, this does meet all of our requirements. Within the staff report, it does talk about the front openings that are on the front of the structure, which appear to be an open porch that once existed, but has been infilled with the smaller windows for a long period of time, and we couldn't locate original drawings or older photographs that showed it in a different condition. So it would have been more appropriate to restore the openings to their original condition and infill it with clear glass so it would simulate the open porch that most likely was once there, but this applicant is simply just asking to replace the existing openings with the single hung windows. The glass would be clear and the frames would be white. In general, they do meet all of the criteria or partially meet the criteria. And in conclusion, staff finds the application for a certificate of appropriateness for major alterations under case number UDP-HP 24038 located at 709 Southwest 4th Court partially meets the criteria outlined in section 472411 D3CI, section 472411 D3CII, and section 4717. There are several conditions for the consideration of the board. One is all glass shall be clear with an option of low E. Glass color must be indicated on window and door schedule. 2, the buttons must be placed on the front entry door to match the existing pattern and must have a raised profile. 3, the air conditioner unit at the southwest corner of the building must be located further north on the site and screening from the right-of-way must be provided. And 4, this application is subject to the approval by building, zoning, and all ULDR requirements. The applicant is here, back of the room. If you'd like to come forward. What? Oh, no.
Better late than never. Can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Good evening, guys. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. So yeah, basically everything she said we agree with. We're going just by the code and the AC unit in the southwest corner we will move back so this will be in the right of way. And the windows are all by code, clear glass, impact windows, and the French door in the front will have the grids to match the current one. That was everything.
Would you both just state your name so she can get it down on the
Dear David.
Sean Elvin. Any questions for us?
No. I have one question for Tricia though. I'm a little confused about the inconsistency of staff saying in the last report that the windows were not appropriate. Not that they weren't appropriate, I'm sorry. That they I'm thinking of the wrong
So
word.
for designation, there's specific criteria in which you're considering for the designation of a building.
Right.
And staff is analyzing whether or not an impact has occurred to the property that would qualify for each of the criteria listed. And
Okay.
so in that case, the analysis of staff was saying that there had been changes to the building. It didn't quite meet that criterion. It met 3 others that we found appropriate for application, but this is a completely different type of request, which is a certificate of appropriateness for an alteration, and we do allow replacement windows, and the windows have been replaced previously on the structure. It's already designated. It's part of the historic district.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys.
Public hearing? Public hearing?
Public hearing? Any questions from the public? Any questions from the board? Any comments?
Just
Any
officially
motions?
close the public hearing.
Close the public hearing? Any comments from the board? Any motions? Any comments?
Motion to approve.
Second. Seconded by Tim, quickly.
Don't have to read it. I'll make a motion to approve the resolution for certificate of appropriateness for major alterations under the case number UDP HP 24038 located at 709 Southwest 4th Court. Based on the findings of fact, and the statements made by the applicants, and including conditions 1, 2, 3, and 4.
We have a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
And next we have case number 3, UGP HP HPD 24004, Historic District Architectural Resource Survey Update, the Himarshi Historic District.
So
Tricia.
this application is specifically to request that the board provide a recommendation to the city commission to adopt the Himarshi Historic District Architectural Resource Survey Update Report that was provided in your packets, and to assign contributing and non-contributing status to all the properties within the Himarshi Historic District. The district itself has been designated for quite some time, since the 70s, and there has not been an updated architectural resource survey of this area since 1985. Typically, we would want to update surveys every 10 years, more or less. And this exercise is one primarily to assemble all of the history of this historic district into one place, provide a background of each of the structures that are within the boundary of the district, and then have a clear record of which properties are contributing to the district versus non-contributing to the district. And contributing is that they represent the value of the historic district, either through the architecture, through the history itself, through the date of construction, or a combination of all of those. So this is really an update and an attempt to collectively represent the district as a whole and to clarify the record, which we haven't had in a while. Staff did reach out to the property owners within the Himarshi Historic District in, I believe, early November. by mail, and then we did post the draft report on our website that was available for comment for the past 2 months. A mail notice was also sent in advance of this public hearing on December 6th, and signs were posted throughout the district. It was also noticed in the newspaper. I believe a few of the members of the public are here to comment potentially on this report. This is something that we did undertake in the Sailboat Bend Historic District about 5 years ago to provide a status for each of the structures within the Sailboat Bend Historic District, which does help when presenting information to the Historic Preservation Board and providing clear information, up-to-date information, and it also helps property owners, existing and future property owners, to understand the value of their properties. So it's helpful to have a clear record available for everyone to view and understand. This also opens up the ability for property owners that are identified as contributing to participate in our incentive programs for historic preservation, which right now, since they don't have a designated status for the contributing structures, they're not able to take advantage of some of the incentives that we have in our ordinance. So the Historic Preservation Board would need to make a motion to the City Commission to make a recommendation as to whether or not they support adopting these findings.
One question for you. The legend in the map there, is that the current, I guess, proposed designations or
The boundary or?
the contributing and non-contributing?
Yes, that is the proposed.
Okay.
Currently, there is not any identification of which properties are contributing or non-contributing.
So one of the new things about this plan is basically there are now 14 contributing structures that would be considered contributing.
Right.
But everybody that's in that district now has to, even not being contributing, if they wanted to make a change or do something, they would still be subject to coming to this board, right?
Correct. This does not change the ordinance that pertains to these properties already. They're already located within the boundary of the Himmershey Historic District. They all follow the same rules, and there's no change to that at this time. Potentially in the future, there'd be a proposal for an update to the ordinance to update some of the language that also was passed in 1977. So some of the language is very out of date as far as what it refers to within the requirements.
There's only a couple non-contributing, and I'm just thinking about the property there. What distinguishes, like, can you just talk a little bit about the criteria that the team used to kind of distinguish? Because when you visually go there, it's like all the buildings look kind of the same.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, in most cases, it's date of construction. Most of this area was focused more on early commercial construction or early town founding. So there's some buildings that have been moved to the district over time. If you looking at like 220, 250, 219, 227, the red boxes on the lower right-hand corner, and 301, those are all city-owned properties, and that's where History Fort Lauderdale is located. Some of the structures in those locations have been moved there. Some of them are original to those locations. Property 247 is an apartment building that's more recent, and the same goes for 221. It's a more recent structure. The blue box 219 is the Hawk Research Center, which is where History Fort Lauderdale is. It was originally constructed in the 1950s as a warehouse, and features have been added onto it over time.
And is that a city building?
It's also a city-owned building.
So 219 is city-owned, 301 is city-owned, which
And
else?
all those red boxes. on the,
So
220.
230, 220, and 227?
yeah, and 219. The other 219, the red 219.
Where's the red? Oh, yeah.
That's the New River Inn.
So everything there in that bottom right-hand corner and the 301 where the historic museum is. And then what about the
Properties
red,
on
the
Timothy?
contributing properties on Southwest Second? Are any of those city owned or are those all privately owned?
Those are all privately owned. And if you go from east to west from the railroad tracks on the south side of the street, the first blue box, that building was built in 1997, so it is not part of the period of significance for this district. And then 208 was, I think, 1940s, and then 210 was a newer structure, and 214 was 1930s or 40s. 300 is one of the original commercial structures on the street, and then across the street, 201 is one of the original structures as well along that street. 301 is it's currently contains a nightclub called Chemistry. It includes a structure that is a former gas station, but it has been modified over time. And 329 is the former house.
One other question, sorry. So on the building that's got the blue, red, that's on the corner of Southwest Second Avenue and Southwest Second Street. I'm just thinking about that block. Those buildings don't look I mean, obviously the one on the corner is new, but the others, like for 208 and 214, what makes them historic versus just they haven't built? Like 200 they developed earlier, so the other folks didn't. So I'm just wondering what is
So when you're looking at a historic district versus a historic landmark, your criteria is slightly different. We have 7 different criteria within the code. 2 of them are specifically related to historic districts that talk more about geographic boundaries and the collection of the structures within that geographic boundary. So you're looking at the overall history of the area, why it was constructed, when it was constructed, what significant events were surrounded by that. You define it by a period of significance, so you define a time period of when it starts and when it ends. The properties that are in the red in that area fall within the period of significance for this area, and they were constructed during that earlier time period and represent that commercial development and early town development that the whole district is representing.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No, any other questions? Then if that's the case, we'll open it up to the public. Anyone wishing to speak, please step up here. And members of the public wishing to speak on any item will have length of time not to exceed 3 minutes. Please
My name is
introduce
Angel
yourself.
Candelaria. I own Chemistry, which is on the corner of 307 Southwest Second Street.
on that map, can you show, it's 300? Which one?
It's 301 through 307 is the address.
That's further up. That's the blue one.
Oh, the blue one, okay.
Sorry. So the issue is we put up some planters on our patio that blocks in the historic gas station. And technically they're not up to whatever standards you guys are, but our issue is that before we took it over, there was on the patio, homeless people would come and camp out, and there would be like, when we moved in, there was like 5 people living there, using our electricity, cooking, there would be drug needles. So every day my staff would come kick them out and clean up their mess, and it became really unsafe. So we put those up, and ever since then, we haven't had a problem. And then the other issue is, a few weeks ago, there was a shooting in the street in front of us, and a minor got shot, and there's 2 bullet holes in the planters. So if we don't have that separation from the street, our people can get hurt. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We don't know what to do.
Well, anything that's being constructed in a historic district and throughout the city, you do sometimes need permits or approvals. And in this case, you would need to come before this board to request anything that you want to construct in that location.
this is
Question,
But
question,
nothing
Trish.
we're doing today
Yeah.
affects his planters,
Right.
right?
No,
Okay.
So,
Well, this is my contractor.
yeah, so I
Could
actually,
you
Please
just state your
introduce
name?
I'm Luigi, I
Luigi,
did all,
last
Luigi
name?
Coloma, I did all the work at Chemistry Nightclub to get it open. They put the planters out after we were done and we closed the permit, and we got a violation, from zoning. So I went ahead, pulled a permit for the planters and made it like a structure, wall, fence type thing. But we labeled it as planters, and we went to the last zoning meeting, and they told us that we have to get approved through historical, and then that they would be fine with it, but it has to get approved, like, cause we're blocking the gas station that's there on the corner, like the view of it, cause they're 6-foot planters or whatever, so, we've gone through everything pretty much, as far as permit, we got plans, new survey for our property, and, we thought coming here was, we were gonna be on the agenda, cause we have put in everything that we need to, and I don't see us on the agenda, but we're here to see like what the next step would be as far for us, because we have a violation, and in March, when that court date comes back, we're gonna start getting charged every day. So
This is not with respect to that. This is for designating each property as contributing or non-contributing. So I don't.
so you would need to contact historic preservation staff, so you can reach out to myself and Lena.
okay,
And I can see if I have my card with me, but you can contact me through the website
okay,
for
perfect,
sure.
yeah, cause we
And then
weren't
we
sure
would-
if we were supposed to come here, cause they were like, go to the next meeting, cause we
Oh.
already have you all submitted for this, because we've submitted everything that we need to.
Oh, yeah,
We're waiting
Yeah,
historical
we have not
review.
received anything for an application, but we can connect on that.
Okay, yeah, well, we just wanted to clear things up, I know we're not on,
Sure. So
But-
while you're here, you own the property?
I don't own the property, I have the business.
so, that was it, all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Anyone else? Please.
You might remember us,
Please introduce yourself.
Richard Mercedes, I represent ownership for 329 North, Southwest Second Street.
I don't know.
It used to be Obie House, now it's Emily's Garden, thanks to you all, we got a nice garden going on there. I'm here because I'm a little confused as to what the game plan is. I guess this is us, so we're contributing. That's already been established?
So this is the process for the board to make a determination on what they'd like to recommend to the city commission. And this area has already been designated since the 1970s as a historic district. So if no action is taken today or in the future, it remains in the historic district, it still follows the same rules. If this does get adopted, it still follows the same rules and regulations. There's just additional information that's available for the board to make determinations in the future when someone comes in to request alterations to a structure within the district. It also affords the historic property owners the ability to take advantage of the incentives.
Is it correct though, wouldn't it also, when you're designating properties contributing or non-contributing, then it also puts additional requirements on the property owner in terms of what they're able to.
Within our ordinance, we don't have a differentiation between contributing and non-contributing. But generally in terms of anyone that would come in before the board for an alteration or a demolition or new construction request, it's part of the information that's provided to the board. It's also provided to the public so that everyone can understand what the value of that property is before they enter into any development of plans or anything that they would want to consider for the future. Typically the board, they weigh the information that's presented in front of them. And since that's not available today, that's something we can't provide to people when they contact us readily. It's not an official document that we can say, refer to this to get more information about your property, or refer to this to understand a little bit more about this district. And we can do that for Sailboat Bend, and I would say it's been helpful for the board in decision making and helpful for people that are interested in purchasing properties within the district and making decisions on what they'd like to do for their properties. But in any case, any property owner within the boundary of the historic district has the ability to come to the board in cases that don't agree with the code and make requests.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm still confused. Are we contributing now, or are you trying to make it contributing?
So let me just ask a question, then maybe we'll answer his question. Today, given the current status of the world, if a motion for alteration comes that's within this district, we would view them all as contributing, because we have no reason to differentiate. They're in the historic district, they have to abide by the guidelines. There's nothing that we can say, well, it's not contributing. But no property owner is afforded any of the incentives that the city offers to contributing. Right. There's no additional hurdles that we're putting on them by designating them contributing.
There's no additional criteria that they need to meet, but when it becomes really important is for the tax exemption in the Florida statutes. It talks about how it's got to be contributing if it's in a district. So that's where some of this stuff comes from, where you don't meet any of the criteria for the benefits if you're not deemed as contributing with certain things. So that's why it's important.
But their criteria is the same, whether you're contributing or not.
Yes, our criteria and our code's the same. It's just that some of the benefits in the Florida statute as well as in our, in our code, you may not be able to get.
And if somebody came before us today, we wouldn't treat them as contributing, we'd just treat them as we treat every property, because it doesn't, from what you're saying, it doesn't matter if it's contributing or non-contributing, the criteria is the
Not
same.
for our code, no. It just, a certificate of appropriateness is the same.
Well, like what about our certificate of demolition? Like something.
It's the same, there's no
It's the
differentiation
same,
in
yeah,
that.
we haven't changed that.
So you're not contributing today, but this would designate you contributing, but the difference between contributing and non-contributing doesn't matter.
Okay.
Because you're a
Well,
piece of your
do you
property.
know if his house is, because it's a big list of non and is.
Yeah, the parcel that he's referring
Is
to
contributing.
is identified as contributing as a status.
You're looking to vote it contributing, or it's already contributing?
So there's no status
It's not.
for any property within the district
It's not
today.
designated today.
It is
Okay.
designated today.
Is it designated
I'm hearing
district,
two
but it's
different
not
things, I
saying it's
apologize.
not designated as contributing
Correct.
unless we,
In a historic district, no property has a designation either way currently.
right.
Are you all giving it to the commission to make it contributing?
Correct.
This report recommends the pink properties to designate them as contributing, the blue properties to designate them as non-contributing. You are all already in a historic district. But this report makes the pink
Okay,
ones
we don't-
contributing and the blue ones non-contributing.
Okay,
And then if we make this recommendation, it then goes to the city commission and the city commission decides. But we recommend yes or no to supporting this
I don't
report.
think I wanna be contributing, so I apologize, but I was told we weren't contributing. I was told that before. Now I'm being told that we are contributing, or you're voting to contribute. And like, it's confusing as to why they're contributing,
Yeah.
non-contributing.
Could I jump in here?
Please.
Sure. I understand your concern as a businessman, but, and correct me if I'm wrong, please. It doesn't matter whether you're contributing or non-contributing for your concerns. You're worried, and I understand that, because I would be too if I didn't get educated here. Your guidelines are the same whether you're contributing or non-contributing. The only thing that changes is that you're going to be identified now. No one has an identity in contributing or non-contributing. They're gonna assign that or suggest the commission does that. When that does happen, because you are contributing, which is the same as non-contributing, or where you are now, because you're under the umbrella of a historic district, only thing that's gonna change is you will be, in your benefit, able to get incentives from the county on tax exemptions and some incentives. They're not great, get mad at me for saying that, but they are there.
Well, I'll tell you why I'm here, because we were approached by Marriott, who's building a huge Marriott here.
Where
That they need a-
are you pointing to?
Right here, all this property is
Right.
Marriott, including this 301. And that's suspiciously non-contributing. Interesting. But we're contributing. And being that Marriott needs a piece of our little garden to help with their entrance or something like that, Now all of a sudden we're gonna be contributing, and I'm just fearful that that's gonna hurt our ability to assist Marriott in doing the development, so, I'm just.
Could you answer his question
You
as whether
said
or not
it,
he
I'll
has
just
something
say
to
it
be
again,
concerned?
so things like tax exemptions, waivers of certain things. In other words, it's more beneficial to be contributing, believe me. I'm not supposed to give you legal advice, but that is not what will happen, okay?
But I
trust
think
me, you
what
don't wanna say
what the
that.
gentleman's trying to establish is that
Yeah.
will this identification of contributing change his, if he even has an ability to work with a developer in terms of his own property, which I believe is, the answer to that is, he can't do anything anyway,
Doesn't do
because his
anything but-
property's in a historic district.
Right, contributing doesn't do anything but benefit somebody. We
Is this
give
an
them
historic district?
waivers.
Yes.
It is.
You're in the
Yes.
district,
Any,
correct?
any change to that property has to come before this.
There we go. So,
Okay.
if he's an historic, and I'm an historic, I guess
He's not doing it.
it's confusing why he's not contributing though. You have to admit that, why is that not
I
contributing?
think those are confusing words,
Yeah.
contributing and non-contributing.
And there was a little gas station there one time, is that little gas station still there?
The gas station, the structure is there, but we looked into the history and comparison of the architecture over time, and it changed dramatically from the first time of construction and till the 1950s or 60s, when components were added to the structure and removed from the structure. And then more recently, the new development was added onto it.
Okay.
But it was a discussion.
So, and I don't know if this is the right time, but there's a lot of problems on that street, I'm sure you all know, there's whether, I heard one say about a shooting, the fighting, we're happy as could be, being there with Emily's, it's a family, kids, puppies come, all kinds of people come, but at a certain time, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, it changes, that street
And
changes.
there, last year, there was a strategic plan effort that started to outline what could be done for improvements. That's still being worked through. This is
Beautiful.
part of that component. So it was one of the first things that was identified as, we just need to clean up some of the information that's available to reference this district, take a look at the zoning code for this area, and then take a look at some of the agreements.
Will you be having a meeting with the stakeholders in the district?
I don't have anything scheduled right
Not yet,
now.
okay.
Yeah.
I'm only asking because we will lose a quorum at 7 o'clock tonight.
Yeah, but we are working on different avenues to make different improvements, and there are ongoing discussions.
Okay, we're good.
Yeah, I think, I understand your concerns, and it is confusing, but you're in a historic district, and everybody in that district, according to what I've been told, has to play by the rules. It's like you're in an Italian and Irish neighborhood. The Italians gotta pay taxes, the Irish gotta pay taxes, but the Italians get free meatballs. There's some benefit to being in that neighborhood.
All right.
You're gonna qualify for it.
Thank you for letting
Thank
me
you.
speak, thank you very much.
So, are there any other questions?
More public hearing,
Anyone else from the public? No.
close the
We'll
public
close the
hearing.
public hearing, open it up to board comments. Any other comments?
I'm good.
I have a question. Was there any public meetings with the stakeholders and property owners in this district to talk to them about what we're doing and what the city's doing? And just because I understand that the rules really doesn't matter, you're in a district, but there's a lot of, both public speakers that got up today were confused as to what's happening. I'm sure there's others, and I just wonder what the engagement of the property owners have been on putting this plan together before it goes to the commission.
So we did reach out in early November to ask for public comment. We had it posted on, the report posted on our website. We did not hold a public meeting prior to this. This is a public hearing, so that's when we're inviting people to come and talk and share information. Everyone was provided my contact information. I heard from the DDA, which is not a property owner, but obviously an interest. I've spoken to the Fort Lauderdale Historical Society, who is a large tenant, and then half of the properties are owned by the city.
I
And
just
there's
think if you're
signage, right?
designating somebody, if you're designating individual property owners as contributing, I understand it's on your website, but how many property owners across the?
There's also signs like physically around.
Tricia,
And-
on page 4, it says that you
I
initiated
understand.
discussions with stakeholders. Is
But
that,
usually
did you
there's some kind
discuss
of
it?
community meeting before
Yeah,
major
on
decisions
page 4
like this
under
are made.
overview
So there was,
of the survey. So actually on page 4 of the, I'll read it and see if there's, so on page 4 of the actual survey, it states in 2023, discussions regarding the revitalization of Himmershey Street and HHD were initiated with a public outreach effort that included one-on-one meetings with stakeholders and an open house event using a variety of hands-on activities. Did you discuss that
so
at
that's
all?
part of the vision plan.
Okay.
But
Or
not
like
part
the
of this.
strategic plan, so part of that was outlining all of the different initiatives that would be undertaken to make improvements to the district. And it was identified as one of the elements that would be undertaken at that time. So it's something that was provided at the time of the open house and in our follow-up meetings with the stakeholders. It was also presented to the city commission last March.
And
It's
by
been
it,
part of the ongoing
you mean the
conversation.
contributing person, it was a part of that.
Right, like the update to the architectural resource survey.
Thank you.
I'll just say whether it's contributing or non-contributing, that's kind of an objective thing, right? It's not, it's like, when was the building built and have there been major alterations since it was built? Like,
Well, so when you're undertaking a survey, you're undertaking it as a qualified professional that's qualified under the definition by the National Park Service as an architectural historian or an architect, and you're weighing it out based on various criteria that's in the code and
yeah,
like taking a look at it holistically.
my point is,
So,
somebody can't come in and say, well, I don't want mine to be contributing. Even if it wasn't on the map as contributing, I would still look at, say, okay, it was built in 1929, there haven't been
It's
any
factual.
alterations, it's a factual thing, it's
Right.
not, it's objective,
It meets
it's a
certain
fact-
criteria.
Right, it just meets it or it doesn't, it's not like somebody can say, well, I don't wanna be distributing.
It's just the definition
You
of the
are, you
property
aren't.
within the historic
Right,
district.
your car is either vintage or
It
it's
just
not.
defines which
Like-
one's which, but they're all under the same guidelines, under that umbrella of historic district. So nothing really changes, that they're just tuning it up, if I'm saying this properly. They're bringing things up to current status quo today. What's going on today? This is what we have today. Last time we looked at it was 15, 20 years ago.
Right.
Things have changed a little bit, just thought we'd like to let you know.
Tricia,
Everybody go
do
home.
we need to vote on this?
yeah, you would need to make a recommendation, just like the first item.
So we need a motion.
Mhm.
What kind of motion?
Well, there is a suggested motion. Well, sort of. Basically, making a motion whether or not the Historic Preservation Board recommends approval of the proposed resolution to the city commission, I think. Sorry.
Yeah, so you could just do a motion to recommend approval of a resolution adopting the Himmershey Historic Architectural Resource Survey Update Report and assigning contributing and non-contributing. So just, or recommend denial, it's up to you, for approval or.
Someone like to make a motion?
I just have one question. How did it last this long without identifying contributing and non-contributing?
I mean, everything was treated the same. Everything is treated the same. And I'm not sure why they didn't do that initially.
Well, I'll tell you, when Tricia and I came, we decided to just work a little harder and fix everything. So, I mean, we did it with Silbo Ben after we came almost 8 years ago.
That's perfect, but I think the thing
I mean,
that,
that's the truth.
I think that a lot of people, what they're afraid of is that there's some distinguishing factor between contributing and non-contributing that would impair them from moving forward. They're both the same when it comes to what the guidelines are for their redevelopment, for what they come before this board for. The only thing that changes is that one is in a category of non-contributing, meaning it does not meet the criteria to be like an A+, and contributing is in a different category, which is truly more historically valued. Is that correct?
Yeah, they get the tax incentives, the waivers,
And then you get the tax
all the
incentives
nice
if you
stuff.
are contributing and you're in a different category, but that's another department, so to speak, okay. All right, then I'll make a motion to approve this, put it before the commission for approval.
Okay, so
and you
it's,
can read it,
okay,
please.
so it's a motion to approve a resolution adopting the Himmershey Historic District Architectural Resource Survey and assigning contributing or non-contributing status to all properties within the Himmershey H1 Historic District. Is it a motion to recommend approval?
It is a motion to recommend it, and just mentioning that this does not change the boundaries of the historic district.
No.
All that remains the same. Thank you. Yes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice seeing you.
And that's all for our regular agenda, I believe. So now we don't have anything for
10
committee.
minutes, please? You said 10
Okay.
minutes, come on.
I gotta really hurry.
10, please,
What-
can we get this on?
The next is not voting on it, right? Like, do you need
Well,
a form
it's
for
a
that?
motion to recommend approval or denial. We continued this last time because somebody was on vacation, a member of the public.
This is the
This time
TDR.
around, we're saying, let's go. It's the same thing every time, so, yeah. It's the same TDR thing we've been discussing for months.
Yeah,
Do we have
but
to
we
go to
don't
the
have
staff
time
report,
for
or
the
can we do-
discussion.
Can we do we have to do a staff report or can we go to public comment and then?
Go to public comment.
It
It hasn't changed since the last month's meeting.
Just continue, that's all.
Okay. I'm okay without listening to the staff report. Is everybody else okay?
Yeah, I think we have staff report. I'm fine.
Yeah.
Public
Listen
comment.
to the public.
Speak.
Yes, put the items up and ready.
It's up already.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Steve Tilbrook with Ackerman Law Firm, representing Jay Adams, the owner of several historic properties in Fort Lauderdale. We're here to comment on your review of proposed ordinance changes to ULDR. We've had several meetings with staff and with legal counsel, and we have some comments that still haven't been fully resolved yet. And I can summarize those for you because this is your opportunity to review and comment. My understanding, Tricia, is that their job is to review the ordinance and present it and make any comments that are warranted at this point. They're not making a recommendation in any capacity today.
They are if they want. The thing is, the code doesn't require it, but we come to them because in the past, planning and zoning board wants to know what their recommendation is. But legally, it's not required, but we always get that vote.
Yeah, today, it was review and comment, is what we talked about at
I
the
didn't say
meeting
that.
today. And so, am I correct? That's what we discussed was review and comment.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I'm gonna recommend to you some comments, okay? Because we're continuing to work on this ordinance. We believe that we're getting closer. Jay is the only property owner in the city that has availed themselves of trying to create a certificate of eligibility to transfer development rights from a historic site in order to preserve that historic site in perpetuity. The ordinance itself is an existing ordinance, and this is an update to the ordinance. And this update was requested by this board. This board requested the city commission to engage a consultant to improve this ordinance, to make it more workable, more easily to work within, and to have these transfers of development rights more efficient and preserve their value. That was the goal. That was the direction that was made by this board and the city commission. City commission delegated it back to staff. The staff has worked on this ordinance. Our comment is that yes, there's some improvements in this ordinance, but it doesn't go far enough. It doesn't really help make these transactions easier, okay? And that's our goal, because in order to find somebody to buy a transfer of development rights, it has to be easy, it has to be definable, and you can't have too much risk. There's a few risks in particular. One is that the certificate of eligibility, which is the first step in the process, has an 18-month expiration period. And our comment is, and we've made this to staff several times, we haven't come to an agreement on it, we're still working on it, is that the certificate of eligibility is not an entitlement. It should not have an expiration. So we're still working towards whether or not we can come to an agreement on that. Today, staff asked us, let's get through tonight. Let's get comments from the Historic Preservation Board, and the board wants to make that comment, that's a fine comment to make. And we're gonna continue to work with staff before it goes to Planning and Zoning Board to try and work out some language on that issue. A second issue, the second issue, big issue, is once there's a certificate of eligibility and there is a transfer of those development rights to another site, and the original sending site becomes preserved through a deed restriction, that receiving site may or may not end up using those units because they don't become used until the project is actually built. Our comment is, and most of the other ordinances we've reviewed have the ability for a receiving site, if they don't use those development rights, to then again be able to transfer them to another receiving site. What that does is it preserves value in those development rights, and they don't just disappear if the project doesn't get built. In any event, the original sending site is still preserved. There's a deed restriction, it's a preserved site. So our comment is that this ordinance, and I think our original reading of the ordinance is that it did allow a subsequent transfer of those unused transferred rights. Since then, staff has given us their opinion that it doesn't allow that. We think it should, and we're gonna continue to advocate for the ability to have a subsequent transfer of unused development rights after a site has been preserved. So those are our two comments. We would appreciate it if you would move this along to the Planning and Zoning Board with those two comments, or at least direction or comments to the staff and the Planning and Zoning Board to do as much as can be done to make these transactions easier, quicker, and preserve the value in these transfer development rights. So that's our comments. We're here to answer any questions as well.
Question.
Yes.
So if the receiving site did not use the units, you're suggesting that receiving site be allowed to send it to another receiving site?
Correct.
Could they also potentially, or should they also potentially be allowed to send it to a bank or something like, if they can't find a receiving site, perhaps it could go to some kind of,
An aggregator?
yeah.
That's a new concept.
Are you asking him or me, or what the code said?
I'm asking his
Okay.
opinion if that should be an option, if that would help.
The problem that the city would have to buy them, and I don't think the city
You
wants to
have
buy
to
them.
come up here and speak.
That's a new concept.
Well, the
I
banks would get
haven't
them.
heard of that concept.
I wasn't suggesting the city would buy them.
In terms of transfers, development rights, having like a mitigation bank kind of a thing. So that's a new concept. If that would help preserve value,
Well, somebody
we-
would have to
we-
create the
we would support it, right? Right now, the way it's crafted is there's a certificate of eligibility, then there's a transfer. That transfer occurs when there's an entitlement to build something. And if that entitlement is not actually built, if that entitlement expires, then those transfer development rights go away. They go away because they can't be transferred again. And we think that's wrong, because the original receiving site is, if it's still preserved, if it's still in compliance with the deed restriction, the public policy of allowing the transfer has been accomplished. So, and it also creates risk. There's risk to a developer that buys those transfer development rights that they may not be able to actually, if they don't use them, that transaction, they lose the value. They should be able to keep that value.
What do other cities do?
And in our study, our analysis of most other ordinances allow a subsequent transfer on the market.
I'm sorry to butt in, we have
But
2
I'm
minutes
answering the
until
question.
Shane leaves,
Good.
so
Okay.
what would you like to do with this?
Sorry.
I know you have
I've
to
gotta
go. I think this is too important to stop the discussion.
Yeah.
If we put this on another agenda, I would just make the request that it go first, because we've.
I agree, because we keep rolling it over, but can we do that?
If you do the vote before Shane leaves, yes, you could do the vote to delay it one more time, to another
But can we
agenda.
put it first on the agenda?
Yes, you can.
Okay, let's vote.
Can-
Make a motion.
If that's okay with you guys, and that would give you some more time to talk.
Can I ask a
about it.
question
Yeah,
before
sure.
we make a motion? After we make this motion, can we still ask staff about questions about this
Can we
without
continue
Shane
our
here?
conversation
Can we continue a
meetings?
couple
Yes,
questions?
it's just that I can't make
We just can't
official
vote.
action.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, I would make a motion to move this to next month's meeting and have it be the first agenda item.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
Thanks,
Thank
Shane.
All right, thanks guys.
thank you.
Thank you.
I have one comment, I know we can't vote on it
Sure.
now. I had two other issues I was going to raise in
For the
this.
good of the, yep. We can talk, I just,
Portion
we
of the
just can't
meeting.
vote for,
Oh, can we talk about them?
sure.
Oh, we can? Okay.
But we'd like to finish with these guys.
I know,
We'll have a seat, if you have questions, you can ask us.
okay.
I do have questions pertaining to this. The transfer of rights to be able to transfer the second time, what is the reasoning behind that we have not added that into
It's in
this
there.
document?
It's in there, it's just saying that you need to designate your property historic first, because the goal of this ordinance is to designate properties as historic. So basically, like each time that it's transferred, it's another transaction with a property that's going to have to designate to transfer it.
But I
Now-
guess, so if property A is historic, they transfer rights to property B. That does not get the entitlements, they don't use, property B doesn't use them, so then they wanna move it a second time to the third property. Are you saying property B has to be a historic too?
Property B gets them, they actually get those units, it's in the public record, because there's a certificate of transfer that's filed in the record, so it's actually filed as a record that they have that. So the only way to change that would be to make that property now a new ascending site and then transfer it over. But if the commission wants to do something different, or
But I just wanna make sure I understand, cause what I think I hear you say is historic property A, transfer units to property B.
Yeah.
Property B is a brand new development and doesn't get and they don't get the entitlements, they don't get the
them.
funding, whatever. So then property B wants to transfer it to property C because property owner A has shuffled them around down to C now because he owns them originally. Right? Cause you're selling them to B and they're going from B to C. Okay, so they're gonna go to property C. Are you saying that property B has to be designated
So
now?
now property B is in a position where they have unused development rights.
Right.
So if property B wants to take take advantage of the program, property B would now become a sending site, and in order to do that, you would have to be designated. Now
They're
you're
designated as
saying
what?
historic.
But it's brand new construction.
But what I'm saying is, I'm not picking on a particular new or whatever property, it's just I'm telling you what's in the code right now. So the distinction is that they're saying that they don't get the entitlements, that's not true. They actually have them, there's a certificate of transfer that's filed, they have that. So the question is, do they wanna turn around and sell them or not? So they have to meet the criteria that's in the code to sell them.
So from
Now-
a practical standpoint, the legislation doesn't work.
No,
To transfer it to property C.
The issue is, the example that she gave, it's a new construction property, but what I'm saying is in general, it doesn't have to be a new construction, it could be anything. It just has to meet the criteria that's in the code, that's what I'm saying.
But a developer
So-
isn't gonna want them unless they're for something that's like a new property, like in
I don't
actuality.
know.
That's the only thing they're good for.
Right.
What else they could be good for?
All I know is people could be building on their own existing property, I have no idea. All I'm saying is that if the board wants to recommend something different, we're open to that, but I'm not gonna make that choice to do that. I mean, the goal of this ordinance is to preserve historic properties and to make as much properties as possible historic, and that's what the goal of this ordinance is.
Right, and there's
And I
little
think-
things like this that it's just not written, right, and it just isn't practical, so these seem to
Nobody
be
will
very
use it.
successful.
Well-
A lot of cities use them, they do great, And the most successful cities, you can sell them like a baseball card. And they make their own market. And
Well,
there's
we're
no
the only
risk.
city in Broward that has had this, and so nobody else in
Well,
Broward does.
well, I'd say
So
Miami
I
does
don't
it
know
and
about-
Sarasota does it. They're two of the best in the state.
Well, Miami, just to give you an example of Miami, their certificate of eligibility expires a year. In a year, they have to actually designate under the Miami code. Now, they can get an extension, they can get something just like we offer. We offer 18 months, more than a year, and we also allow you to renew it for another 18, that's more than Miami. So after those
I'm
2
not sure
years,
that's right.
after two, oh no, I
Okay.
read the codes, that we've been doing this for about 8 years. So in Miami, after that 2 years, it's done, it's over with. You can't even get it. So we're much more generous than Miami, so that's another point. But yeah, there's no indefinite certificate of eligibility, that's just not true.
I did a lot of research on cities, and I sent you guys that, I don't know if you looked at it, probably haven't had a chance. But it lists a lot of the cities that do allow to sell them, and they don't expire. And those are the best ones. A lot of cities that have these TDRs, they don't work at all because of, issues with the code.
If
I mean,
we're
I think-
available.
Just to
next
clarify
month
what Ashley brought up was the TDR use, the way it's written, would always be leaving a historically designated property. So if it can go to a non-historic property, but that ends it going anywhere else.
If you choose that. So it's up to
If-
the
I'm
board
sorry,
and the commission.
if you what?
If you choose to make that change, it's up to the board and the commission to make that decision. It's not for me to make that decision.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, the way it's written now,
Mhm.
he has a historic property, he gives it to a developer who's building a high rise that's non-historic. But what he's suggesting is that guy should be able to pass it on to someone else. But his ability to pass that on is negated
If he-
because he's not historic.
Right, if he doesn't use
So the
it,
historic tagline stays with those TDRs
right,
at this time. That's the way the code's written.
to make it
What
a
they're
choice.
suggesting is we get rid of that identification code and call it a TDR. It's universally applied. It could go historic, non-historic, up, down, and all around.
Yeah, I
Is that
mean,
what you're suggesting?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what would the Historic Preservations Society or staff, why would they object to that?
I mean,
Does
potentially-
that deter historic preservation?
Potentially, a new developer could accrue a lot of units and resell them at a higher value when the timing is right.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
It's-
It has
It
to
could
be within
potentially dilute
Within the
the
zoning though.
Still
the
preserves the site
original
though.
TDRs and dilute the ability for other historic property owners to utilize the program.
Well, that would actually help preserve properties, because they could be worth more, therefore they're
You're
bought.
raising the value of
Right.
the
Right.
The
of
profit,
the unit.
yeah.
If there's a risk that they're gonna expire, then that devalues the
Big
units,
time.
right? So you want to create a system that allows the value to be preserved.
Well,
Well,
that's why I like the idea of continuing this conversation and keep talking about, rather than kind of speculate what it might do or did do, could do. We will look at other cities and how they work and how they trade this stuff.
Yeah.
Listen, the developers are always gonna have one opinion and the historic is gonna have the other, but I'm just a little confused in that if the intention is not for them to go into the wrong hands, then why should they ever leave the historic property unless they're designated to go to another historic property to begin with? Because in my opinion, once you allow them to be transferred into the first step, which could be non-historic, then they should be open market.
Right.
Well, I
Or
think-
closed market all the way through.
I think the problem is this, is that if somebody wants the units, then why would they ever try to have someone designate their property? In other words, all they have to do is kind of sit there and wait and coast for a year or two, whatever, until that's transferred to somebody that won't use it and never intended to use it and just will give it to them. So in other words, less people will use the program less people will designate their property as the criteria that's required to participate in the program, because all you have to do is wait until the second person will transfer it.
But again,
In other words,
the historic building sold it to someone and it's preserved.
But what I'm saying is, if you could just get the units and then transfer them, there's no criteria you need to meet in the code in order to participate in the program, then why would somebody participate?
Well, the receiving site still needs to meet the criteria for a receiving site.
But what I'm saying is, why would somebody participate in the program when they could just be property number 3 and just sit there?
Well, you don't want property number 3 was never gonna be historic. The whole point is if somebody buys a property or has a property in the historic district, they can sell that value
Right.
and still maintain their property. So
Right.
why wouldn't,
They have to
I don't
make-
understand how
So
that
let's say-
calculation
let's say-
changes.
Okay, so let's say property A, right, transfers to B.
Mhm.
B doesn't use it. So then B says, okay, I wanted to make some money, let me transfer it to C. Well, C doesn't use it. I wanna make some money, let me transfer it to D.
Yeah,
D,
why not?
F, C.
But
The
who-
point is that only one property was designated, that's not the intention of the ordinance. The
But
ordinance
it's
is to
still
get-
only how many ever units came from that property, so if
But
it's
it's
2
still the
units,
same
5
units.
units, or
But-
10
But
units,
the
what
goal
does it
was
matter?
accomplished,
But-
because property
but-
A is now, has sold their development rights.
So the
And it's
goal of
historic.
the ordinance is to get as many properties designated as possible and to get as many properties preserving the historic aspects of their
But
property.
if you had more,
Not to have,
if you created a market and had more buyers,
Right.
you raised the value of it, now you're gonna have these homeowners who are like, ooh, I wanna sell my property, my development rights.
Right.
And the value will go up. Once they sell it and it's designated historic, we've accomplished our mission. The markets are out there, who cares what the market does
but
at
there's
that
only
point?
one property versus several properties, that's the problem.
But it's
with it.
still only how many ever units came from that one property. So
Right.
if that one property has 5 units, 2 units, 10 units, 12 units, whatever the number is, that number doesn't change, and you still get that property designated as historic. Like whether it goes to property A, C, or D, what do we care?
What do we
Because we
care?
still got it.
Because we want property C designated, that's the problem.
As
But
a
property
C,
C isn't even in the
No,
district, so what do we?
I'm making up a letter, I'm making up a
I know,
letter,
but if
I'm
that
just
is
saying
not
that-
even in the historic district and
Well,
that
I
unit
don't know
was.
that. The example that you're giving is just a new property, a brand new property. It could be any other type of property. It could be any sort of,
This is
additional
meant for
units.
new
For
development.
example, Pier 66, they're adding a bunch of units there, so.
I get what everybody's saying, but I just think the code's intention works well on paper, but not in practicality, in that if it was trying to preserve the historic preservation process, the TDRs would only be able to be transferred to another historic designated property, which they won't need that anyway because they can't, can they use them? What would be, can you give me a scenario where you go from one historic property to another historic property and need
It doesn't-
TDRs?
you wouldn't
Yeah,
use
it's
them in
not
the
for
you
new
can't.
construction.
I don't even know that you could. You
So,
have to-
so what, that's where I'm a little confused.
It's not for new construction only, there's
renovation.
criteria for a receiving site that there's nowhere in there that says new construction. This is an example being given.
So
But like
how
I
many-
said, Pier 66 is an example of a property that is a portion of it is being built that's new. But there's an existing property there that has been deemed, that's supposed to be deemed historic in accordance with the development agreement. So what I'm saying is that that's a great example, but it's not, it doesn't apply all the time. But again, you can
I
make, you
think
can
Pier,
make recommendations.
and I think Pier 66, I'm very in tune to that project. I think that is not a good example because what you had there is a small parcel of land. You had a tower. The development designated the one tower so they could get 3 more towers, and I don't even know how many homes there. It was a lot. It was a softball to give the tower. So I don't think that what we're talking about here is applicable to what. And I'm supportive of that project. I'm not saying anything disparaging of the project. I'm just saying that is not a good example to use for how people would use these. But and then I would just say, I feel like this thing has come before us at 3 meetings now. I don't think it's changed much since the first meeting. I think we either need to, at the next meeting, try to address the 2 concerns from these folks, or say we're not gonna address the concerns and move it forward. But I think what we're doing right now is we're not changing. They keep saying they have these issues. The issues are the same. Staff has heard the issues. We have all heard the issues. And we either need to say, we'd like to see some of this incorporated or not. I personally feel like if we have an ordinance and a program that the very people that we want to utilize it don't find it useful, then it's not like, yeah, we have a program, but if nobody utilizes it, what's the purpose of the program? We're still not preserving any buildings with a program that's going unused.
I agree, we wanna create a market where somebody wants to buy these units. So and it needs to be.
Yeah, and again, I think you make a good point of how much of this really falls in our responsibility
In our
as a
next
historic
topic,
board.
I have a solution for that.
Yeah, I mean, the Broward County Land Use Plan makes it very clear that, it has to be a public purpose with what we selected, which is the preservation of historic property. So that's the ultimate public purpose with this. So we just wanna make sure we maintain that focus.
However, I would argue that when it's sold and the money goes to the historic property owner, we've met that responsibility.
Good
And
job.
then that item has tangibility.
Yes.
It doesn't ghost itself and have an expiration date, it doesn't go nowhere. It's like a jewel, it's like trading a gold brick.
Exactly.
So the next guy wants a gold brick, you sell him the gold brick, and if he gets more for it, God bless him. God bless America.
Exactly, we should create an infrastructure so that a free market can come in and create a market if one wants to be created.
And
We're gonna continue to work with staff, before next month, maybe we'll make some improvement, if not, we're gonna continue to work with staff before it goes to historic planning and zoning board. So that's our commitment.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for your service. It's a late night. Happy New Year.
I have to excuse myself.
But Arthur, did you have something to say about it?
I have to excuse
But-
myself, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have something that directly impacts what you just said.
Okay.
I'd like to bring up another item on the communication issue. This is an issue that came up about 2 or 3 years ago about thematic historic districts. And it directly impacts what we're talking about, how it impacts historic districts. I want to again include a discussion regarding this issue that be placed on the next meeting agenda for a discussion and vote. Thematic historic districts include properties and or structures which are related to each other through a common theme, but which are not necessarily all located within a contiguous area. The theme might be buildings of a famous local architect, for example. By contrast, traditional local historic districts are based on contiguous geographical boundaries, with all properties or structures on a particular block or in a recognized neighborhood. Thematic districts do not need to be contiguous. The purpose of a thematic district is to preserve designated parts of a town which embodies locally significant elements of the town's historic, cultural, and architectural assets and contains an integrity of design and character emblematic of our city. A thematic district could be utilized to honor local architects such as Francis Abreu or Charles McCurahan, for example, in Fort Lauderdale. Thematic districts could also be utilized in conjunction with the transfer of development rights we have just discussed. We in Fort Lauderdale have a world-class collection of mid-century architecture, which today is under a real threat of demolition and or desecration, and for urgent need of further protection. Thematic historic districts have already been established in Davie, Florida, Philadelphia, San Diego, Honolulu, Joliet, Illinois, and Elgin, Illinois, among many others. Properties within a thematic historic district should be subject to design guidelines and preservation standards in place to protect the historic character of the area. In addition, any exterior property improvements, alterations, or demolition should require review by the City of Fort Lauderdale Historic Preservation Board. This item reached the City Commission several years ago. Several of you were on the board at that time. However, there was much misinformation during the approval process, and the second vote failed at the City Commission. For instance, when the vote came before the Planning Board, the only person who testified at the Planning Board was the attorney for the applicant. Nobody else spoke. So obviously it was a little biased. So I think that, I think it's a very timely event here, especially with what we just talked about with Francis Abreu and for his limited role in Fort Lauderdale architecture and the fact that none of his buildings, very few of his buildings are saved, and this idea of the transfer of development rights ties into so beautifully with the whole idea of saving historic buildings and giving the transfer of development rights a purpose to save development rights. Anyway,
So, just so I understand what,
You fit all that on one piece of paper that you just said?
yeah.
That's right, awfully small.
Arthur's example would be that the historic transfer would start with a historic property and be transferred to a district, to a property on the district that was in the district that may be developed, so to speak, under the guidelines of the district, I don't know, but.
Well, it'd be a new district.
But what I'm asking you, Trish, and I'm sorry to keep everybody here, but what's the difference between this district that he's describing and a contiguous district?
Well, this district could be anywhere in the city. There could be
So
one
it could
place
be
here, it would be
somebody here off of Las Olas or whatever,
Non-contiguous.
and then somebody like further down,
But everything
off
in
of West
between is under the umbrella of the guidelines of a historic district?
No, so
It's
they could
non-
be further away, mile away, whatever, and so the
They're tied collectively through
the
like a historic event.
architect,
usually.
whatever, but the issue was that it was defeated by the city commission at the second vote. The testimony indicated to me that they were concerned about folks trying to designate each other's property with not good intentions, et cetera, but I mean, I think it's best to just maybe watch that video. I think that's July, let me give you the exact date that it was deleted, but it defeated, but it was July
But what's
July 5th, 2023. So the problem is, Arthur, respectfully, we worked on that ordinance very, very hard.
I know.
The thing is that if politically it is not being supported, I just don't know why we would do that again. So it's just, we don't mind it, we don't have a personal issue with it, but it's up to the elected officials, and they said no in 2023. I'm not sure who was on I wasn't paying attention to who
Well, the
did the
commissioners
voting.
changed, that's why I think it may be
Right.
timely.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can say is I don't, go to commissioners to poll them or anything, so I don't know how they would go. It's just, it's difficult for us to go down that road again, because we were sort of, I'm sure we watched the planning and zoning.
district?
Thematic historic
Thematic?
district.
Yeah,
How do you spell
So,
that?
THEMATIC.
thematic? Okay.
we would, I just think it may be more appropriate maybe at the next meeting, if you want that, perhaps they could do a vote to the commission and ask them, are they willing to reconsider, and we could bring it back again. It's just that we don't wanna go down that road and then the same thing happens again, because
Right,
for us, we
so what do you say?
So at the next meeting, when we have quorum for the good of the city, we could see if the board members will vote for a communication to the city commission to say, hey, are you willing to support to recommend that
Take
staff go
another
ahead
shot
and
at
vote?
it.
Right,
And then we go from there, because otherwise it's just a fool's,
of course, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
May I make a motion to adjourn?
Oh, no,
I don't even think
you
you
can
can
just
make a
adjourn, because we don't have, yeah, you can
quorum.
Oh,
adjourn.
so we're
You
done?
can just adjourn anyways.
I have one more quick item.
Okay, I'm just
My
stretching my lower
That's
timer
all
is
right.
about to expire.
I'm just stretching my
Okay.
lower
I
back.
have like 2 minutes.
Okay, my quick item is Ferguson's, that the city commission decided not to, I'm sorry, what did they do? They
Well, they
didn't approve
deferred
it.
it.
They deferred it.
They deferred it, but they didn't defer it, in public.
Yes.
No,
It
they
was
did, they
deferred.
did at the commission meeting, so that's another one too, we don't have any control over that. It's been about, what,
Couple years.
2 years maybe, but don't quote me, but it's been about that, but again, that's up to the elected officials, Tricia and I have no say on that.
What's the story with that? Is that coming back to the commission?
Scheduled for February 18th.
And what is to happen there?
We don't know.
It
Oh.
is scheduled for them to consider it
Out
for
to the
historic
right.
designation.
Pardon?
It is scheduled for them to consider it for historic designation.
Fine, thank you.
It's adjourned, right? Just making sure it's
We're
adjourned.
adjourned.
Okay.
We only have one left now, so.
Oh, I do like this spot, it's pretty nice.
This one is nice, and